your kids to square dance, and I couldn't get through to them because they were too busy. They were too busy in sports. So,
well, that's not uncommon. Well,
I said,
ladies and gentlemen, it's 9 o'clock in the morning and we're going to get started. Once again, thanks all for coming in, and thanks again to Mark Hart for recording and doing. He's watching the door. And if you have any questions or comments, please post them in the chat. If it's relevant to the slide that's on, or whatever it is I'm talking about at any particular moment, feel free to jump in because I cannot see you while I'm presenting. I've only got the two screens up, unfortunately, and it would be lovely to have it set up that I could do it, but I'm not technologically advanced enough to figure that part out. Okay, so what we're talking about today is formation management, and that's just understanding how to manage formations. And what I want to do is I want to take a step back in order to move forward. One of the biggest comments that new callers have is when they get taught formation management at a caller school, or they get taught formation management, there's a level of assumed knowledge. And most new callers start with a path of, here's some singing calls, do a singing call, here's a pattern, just do your singing call figure for this. And then eventually they get to a caller school and they say formation management. Well, you got formation, you got arrangement, you got sequence, you got, relationships and everything else. And if you do this from this thing, you're in a corner box. And if you just do a square through three from that corner box, and then you can do a trade by, you're in a right-hand box. And your brain is going, what the hell just happened? And that level of assumed knowledge is saying, well, I've seen you move dancers, you must know this. Well, chances are you don't, because while it's important to do that to start and get the rhythms and the feeling, you still have to take that step back to understand why what you're doing works. And if you can't do that, then you can't really move forward. So hence the first slide. It's very important to start here rather than here. Here is calling that wonderful pattern that's all pre-written, and that wonderful singing call that's got a very complex figure, and you do a great job, but you haven't got a clue about what it's all about because you don't understand this part first. So why is it that callers try to define square dance choreography, something that is really relatively simple, in ways that are so complex and cumbersome, it becomes daunting and overwhelming? And one of these issues in that daunting and overwhelming is simply formation management. Formation management itself is rarely defined, and like most things in square dance, when you ask about formation management, you receive a response that deals with formation, arrangement, sequence, relationship, choreographic effects, dancer interactivity, proper and improper, and so many more things. And while all of those are definitely part of effective calling, they don't tell you the what or the how to effectively just manage formations in square dance. So Caller Lab has identified 79 square dance formations, and those are available on the formations pictograms chart. And the links to these charts that I'm going to be talking about are going to be included in the reference documents on the site. So, if you got them, you can go and download a copy. Of those 79 formations, you'll note there's no gender assignation, but they're just simply an arrangement of dancers on the floor. And Caller Lab also states that arrangement is important to formation management, and goes on to present that of those 79 formations, there's 27 common formations, or rather 27 selected formations that include the right hand and left hand options. In other words, right hand wave, left hand wave, that are most prevalent. And those are available on the formations and arrangement charts of Caller Lab. Ooh, it's starting to get complex now. So although 27 seems like a much more manageable number, they also teach you that of those 27 formations, each one has 6 possible arrangements of gender balance. And what this means is what is common to that formation management and understanding has gone from 79 non-gendered to the Caller Lab simplified 27, meaning you've got 135 different formation arrangements groups to keep in the back of your head. Now, to me, that doesn't make sense. That doesn't take a step back at all. It's too much to take in for any new or journeyman caller, and even for most tradesman level callers like myself. And even a lot of the most experienced callers still have trouble with that, unless they're choreographic technicians. So depending on who you're talking to, all this brings into aspects of square dancing and relationship when managing formations. More complexity that is not necessary. It's not. You don't need it at this point. The sad part is, what is really a relatively simple thing becomes a complex web of holistic management options and techniques that are personalized and as diverse as the number of callers that are out there. Everyone has their own way, and that's the right way. That's what we don't want. We want to simplify it. So this is the difference between what we're saying, especially as a mentor or a teacher, to what we really want to say on formation management. So when we talk about it, the discussion right now usually comes in two parts. The first is FASAR. Well, FASAR is nothing but a description name, regardless of how it is presented, that describes the formation that the dancer's in, one of those 97 possibilities, the arrangement the dancers are in, the boy-girl relationship, and the possible 6 options of that, the sequence of the dancers, there's 4 possibilities of that, and the relationship, who is with whom. It's gendered, and there's only 4 possibilities. You either got your partner, your corner, your right hand, or your opposite. That's still way, way, way too complex. The second is defining the choreographic definition relative to position and arrangement. This is what we're trying to force down callers right now. In other words, where do they start from? What can they do from there? And where do they end up when they've done it? Well, that's what I want to focus on, because the reality is at this point, I don't really care about a boy-girl arrangement other than normal boy on the left, girl on the right, or standard waves. All I'm worried about is what's the formation they start in? What can I call? Where do they go? That's formation. Formation management and marking that has got nothing to do with resolution. What it has to do is with caller talk. It's all valuable information, but the reality is most is only, and this is the discussion I had with Yolanda, for reference between one caller talking to another, or for callers to see where the dancers they are and use an appropriate call to end the sequence or do something. There's very, very little correlation between understanding where they start, what can they do, and where they end up to actually managing the formations to a resolution. That's if you're doing that, your focus is right now in the wrong place as a new caller. So what we have to do is look at what are the tools of our trade here. Choreographic movement mechanics, timing, body flow, dance action, and all those other things are all valuable foundation tools, and they're all knowledge that's necessary. However, again, it really has little to do with the managing the formation any more than a hammer, saw, nails, and boards have to do with what you're going to build. They're tools. The decision of putting it together and making something is little more than using basic tools to build something. And to do that, you've got to have a picture in your mind of what you want to achieve. Every builder, just like every caller, should have a picture in their mind of what they want that finished project to look like step by step. And that way they can have a basic understanding of the tools and the supplies available that are with them that they can use to achieve that product that they're going to. So when we talk about formation management, we've got to stop treating new callers as master craftsmen. We don't want them to build skyscrapers and mansions to begin with. We've got to teach them to begin learning how to build a simple box or a simple birdhouse. And to do this with calling choreography, we need to take a big step backward and start imposing limitations on what we use. Although difficult for many, in the long term, it's a very rewarding exercise, because although starting may be a little bit slower for some, the growth and development potential is just absolutely exponential. The learning process becomes fun for both the callers and the dancers, as they can both understand and enjoy that process step by step. So to start with this, what we need to do is start looking at dancing or defining the formations, and we need to really simplify this. When we look at this, we think formation management, but let's put limitations in place and really simplify what we're going to do. The 3 things I'm going to look at are: 1, the shape. Okay, there are really only 3 shapes, and they are in a circle, in a line, or in a box. All the rest of them are just bits and pieces that they transit through, and names moving through those 3 shapes, names that we give them wherever they are within those 3 shapes doing something. The second is standard arrangement, and we want to keep it standard. That's boy-girl is a normal standard relationship. If we accept that, then all the rest are not standard relationships, and that's as far as we want to go for a new caller. And the third is facing direction. The facing direction is what determines what choreography we're going to use. So really, I'm going to start with a picture of my head of a circle with 2 big fat lines going up and down or across. And if you can picture that in your head, then you already have the basic fundamental of formation management in square dance management, because essentially you're either going to go around the circle or you're going to be on one side or the other, in the middle, or moving back and forth across. There are really no other options. So you got the circle working around the outside, a box of two couples working independently in the center, or two boxes in each of these areas. There's no other options. And these two boxes, they work across north or east and west, or north and south. Whoop. Now that we've got the basics of formations down, what we have to do is set parameters of our arrangement being boy on the left, girl on the right as standard, and accept it. All the others are different. Now it suddenly becomes a lot more simple to manage what the dancers do. So please remember here, we're only managing the formation and arrangement of the dancers, the formation of where they are, either the circle, the line, or the box, and the arrangement, boy on the left, girl on the right. Everything else we don't really care about, other than to get them out of something else and back into one of those standard. And what we want to do is be able to move them comfortably back and forth, up and down, or around the middle of that square or that circle. Or, in the case of the center box, to work independently with another two dancers in the middle of the square. The reality is there's no other options. These concepts are often referred to as the circle and the grid. And the movement is essentially the traffic pattern of movement to get from one point to next point on that grid. So if we talk about circle and grid, let's explain it. We're gonna come back to that moving back and forth and across, but in a bit. But if we relate to the activities in formation and arrangement, our list of 97 formations really drops down to 12 because we put those limitations. Okay. The first one, and we'll just go left to right on the top row, and then we'll come to the bottom. The first one is a normal square. A normal square, we all know what that looks like. We've got couple 1, 2, 3, and 4. They're all marked in this one with their separate colors, white, red, blue, and yellow. We've got men on the left, girl on the right. We've got a facing direction as indicated by the little dot on their noses. And we've got head couples and side couples. We all know how to identify a square. The next one we have is a normal circle, which is basically they've all joined hands in a square and they've made a big circle and they're moving it. And common movements would be circle left, Alaman left, those kinds of things. We haven't really changed anything. We've still got a formation, and we've got boy on the left, girl on the right. The third one is the Alamo circle. The men are facing in the center, the ladies are facing out. The reverse is also possible. In this example, every lady is with her partner, man on the left, girl on the right, but those things change. And we've got common moves like balance or swing through and stuff that you can do from the Alamo circle. The fourth one is lines facing in. All the dancers are facing into the square. You got common moves, forward and back, pass through, Lines facing out. Common moves are wheel around, wheel and deal, those kinds of things. Those are interactive movements with others, or you can, partner trades, those kinds of things. Two-face lines is where in each line, one couple's facing out and the other couple's facing in. And those can be left or right, it doesn't matter. But the thing you notice that's consistent, boy on the left, girl on the right, in every situation. Down in the next row, we've got ocean waves. Ocean waves alternate the dancers in the wave facing opposite direction. Each man is holding a lady's right hand with his right hand. So that's a right hand ocean wave. If they're holding left hands, it's a left hand ocean wave. And you've got your movements like swing through or boys run, girls run. And this is still boy on the left, girl on the right. And if you don't know how to identify an ocean wave, you start with the left-hand corner of the end facing in. Always the left-hand corner. They could be facing in there, but always the left-hand corner. And that's going to tell this is a boy-girl wave. If I had the girls on the outside, it'd be a girl-boy wave. And so on and so forth. 8 chain through box. The end couples are facing in, the center couples are facing out. Common movements, Alaman left, right and left through, touch a quarter, 8 chain through or 8 chain 4. Double pass through is where all the dancers are facing in. You get there, and you can see all the dancers are facing into the center of this grid. Common movement as per the name, double pass through or centers pass through. Completed double pass-through, well, they've completed the double pass-through. All the dancers are facing out. They're in that line, but they're all facing out. And your common movements are cloverleaf or centers in and do something, that kind of stuff. The next one is trade by. The end dancers are facing out. The center dancers are facing in. Common things are trade by, of course, or centers pass through or outsides partner trade, all those other kinds of things. And the last one is the column. One dancer is facing in at the front of the line, and 4 dancers are facing the other way. So one dancer facing in and the other. And it just goes around and around and around. So at the front of the column, you got one person facing in, and everybody's looking at somebody's back. Front, one person looking in. And you got circulate, boys or girls run. Now, these are the 12 what I call critical formations that new callers need to learn. Okay. The first 3 are circle movements, and everything that you do is going to do in the circle, whether it's right hand, left hand, circle left, all that other kind of stuff. And then there's the grid movements, which are essentially lines. And the only thing that determines the name of the formation is the direction of the facing dancers. These 12 formations have been selected because they represent the most commonly facilitated movements back and forth across the grid, going back and forth in a linear formation across the square and moving around in the circle. Many other movements can be used from multiple formations. Many other movements can be used for these, but I've only mentioned a few of the more common ones. Now, while there are obviously at least 67 other named formation that Collar Lab has, the vast majority of them are either isolated or transitory, such as what we're talking the quarter tag earlier, that brings you in most cases back to one of these above named 12 formations. Note, while these diagrams and descriptions have identifiable relationships and sequences, we don't care about them. I could easily have all those as just black dots. Okay. We don't care about them at this point because what we're really getting, we don't care about them until we're getting ready to resolve a square dance. And that is a completely different skill set. We don't care about that right now. All we want to do is figure out how to move from one formation to the next one. So really choreography and formation management has 3 parts. And the very first part of formation management is understanding the base mechanics of each individual movement that you plan to use. And that's where your call analysis sheet comes in. It is important. It's not necessary to understand every nuance and every technicality of that movement, but it is important to understand that from a standard position, where does this movement start? Where does it lead me when I'm finished the movement? If I know that, then I can say, okay, what can I call next? And once we understand that, we're starting the basis of using choreography to manage the formations that we use. Now, I highly recommend that everybody have a call analysis sheet. The one I've got there is analyzing a call. That's the Collar Lab analysis sheet, but there's been lots of other good ones. Janet has presented one on call analysis on Dawn's session, and Guido's presented one here. Whatever works for you is the best, but you should at least know from a standard position, or where do I start? What formation am I in? Where does it end? And what can I do next? So if you can answer those 3 questions, you're well on your way. Okay, so let's start with the circle formations. Circle formations are really the easiest to manage in general terms because they maintain and use a readily identifiable layout of the arrangement of boys and girls, and because of the limitations of what can actually be done in a circle. Those restrictions tend to make movement around clockwise, either concentric or counterclockwise concurrently, such as dars, right and left grands, weave the ring, things like that. They can also be positionally marked. For instance, 4 girls star by the right. The boys are standing there. They're marking that position. 4 boys star by the right. The position of the girl is static because it's marked. Pass your partner, that's a marked position. Find the corner, that's a marked position. Finally, they can be supported. Heads or circle left, roll away with a half sachet or roll away. Yeah, I shouldn't say with a half sachet, but anyway, I did. It's supported because it's there. An Allemande left. There's a supported arm turn. In the Alamo style, there's supported turn. Swing through, that's supported, that's supported. These are great movements for openers, for breaks, and for flow development for the dancers just to move comfortably and have fun. And there's not a lot of options in your circle movements, so use them to the best of your ability. The second is the box. Most square dance choreography is done with two couples in a box type formation. Okay, it may be a line of four, but it's really one box facing another box. And because of symmetry, both boxes are doing the same thing at the same time. The only time that changes is if you have the dancers moving in the center. And that means they're working a group of four, the other ones aren't involved. Okay, and we can see how that effect keeps those four dancers working together by themselves without the interaction of the other two couples. Consider the sequence. If I'm in a static square and I go heads past the ocean, head ladies trade, swing through, centers spin the top, recycle, same centers right and left through. Okay, I put them in, I've danced them around in the center in isolation, I brought them back to the same footprint, and the sides have done nothing. I'm working the center box. Okay, and most of your choreography is two couple choreography. That means the box is one of the most important tools in formation management, as the use of choreography in a box is really what develops about 90% of your dance action, as well as the mechanics of aspect chains. Am I facing head walls or side walls? And doing all this is where you get to achieve a different feeling for the same movements. It's important to understand that the box, which is two couples, and its relationship to what we call the grid. Okay, when working in a line of four, we're not going to talk about the facing directions. Essentially, you've got three identifiable boxes. You've got a west box, you've got an east box, and you've got a center box. And no matter how far you or how you move the dancers, unless you're using movements such as spin chain through that interchange them, everything is going to be done in two couples. One box is working alone at any given time. Where there's a north-south or an east-west grid, that's irrelevant. That only relates to the orientation of the square, which way the dancers are facing, north, south, east to west. The principles of the box moving are exactly the same. So what you've got to remember, the boxes are identified in relation to the color's position from a static square. So if I'm looking at the square, the west box is on the left, the right box is on the right, the center box is in the center. There's really nothing more complex to it than that. Did that change? No. Okay, now the third part of this stool is the grid. If we understand the basic principle of the box, and that those 10 line formations that we had, or I think the 9 line formations we had, are really just boxes, relative only, and defined by the facing direction of the dancer within that box. If I have lines of 4 facing, standard lines of 4, I have two couples on one side, I've got 2 couples on the other side, I've got 2 couples in the middle. I've got 3 possible boxes to play with. If I've got a facing line and I have the girls turn around, I still have 2 couples on one side, 2 couples on the other side, 2 couples in the middle. But I've defined the name of the formation simply by defining the direction that the dancers are facing. That becomes an ocean wave. That's all there is to it. And there's really only the 3 circle and the 9 line formations. Let me just change that to a 9. Okay. So once we have that, we can look at the simple principle of movement within the individual boxes and or moving selected dancers across the square to work with another box. And this movement of moving along defined lines across back and forth is essentially known as moving within the grid. This movement in the grid is referred to often as traffic flow, and the relative movement back and forth is called a traffic pattern. And the traffic pattern usually has boys going one way, girls going the other way. We'll discuss that. This is called moving within the grid, and generally is done in two ways. The first is the isolated box. Okay. And this is when two couples, and you notice we've got two couples, no matter which box we use, we're only working two couples. Two couples maintain their relative position on one side of the grid, and that effect of what they're doing is mirrored, or the symmetrical nature of the square means it's the same activities being performed on the other side. In this instance, when you move the dancers within their own box, they may change their aspect many times. Which way they're facing is going to change. If I call star through, I'm now facing north and south. If I call right and left through, I'm still facing east and west. But I've still got those two couples isolated in their box. What that means, it makes choreographic management of formations within a box quite simple. Because most square dance choreography is two couple choreography, and because of the principles of symmetry, managing formations in a box is relatively easy. So if you remember our initial two couple box sequence that we talked about when I just had the heads do something, all I have to do now is just remove that reference to heads or sides, and we can do exactly the same thing. So if we had the heads square through, and let's say that put us in our east and west box, if I use that same sequence, pass the ocean, centers trade, swing through, spin the top, recycle, right and left through, I get right back to where I'm standing. But it will feel completely different because the ocean wave is not just a group of being watched. It's now a tidal wave. It's four dancers. You can't see the square. We're going north-south. We're going east-west. We're transiting back and forth, and we're moving around. And because I've made that big, long wave in the middle, it feels like I'm interacting, but I'm not. I'm really only doing the same two-couple dance. If we want to move back and forth across the grid and maintain this relationship of the two couples staying together, we would use either a couple or single dancer choreography, such as circulates, but ensuring that the activity is done twice to maintain that fixed two couple relationship. For instance, from a two-face line, if I did veer to the left, I would say couples circulate twice. I've still got those same two couples together. If I'm in an ocean wave, I would say all 8 circulate twice. That would give me those 4 couples in the relationship, but it allowed me to interact with the square, moving across to change the aspect. It does not change the fixed two couple relationship in the established box. It's essentially like putting a rubber band around them to keep them together. So, and that right there in simple formation management is the basis of something that comes along later, isolated site, because I'm just dancing in isolation. The next one is interactive boxes. This is when a couple or dancer has independent movement across the square to the other side. Okay, and it's usually performed with such moves as a single circulate or a concurrent couples movement, such as wheel and deal from lines facing out, or from a trade by formation, trade by where the centers actually cross the middle, or from that box, veer to the left, couples circulate once. It's a single circulate. In this instance, the basic principle is acknowledging the fact that you had a box and you've moved 2 people from that box across the middle line somewhere and created a box with 2 different people on the other side of the square. That's all there is. I've moved 1 couple from here over to this side. That means if I do that, I have to move 1 couple from that side over to my side. I'm just changing 2 couples. You can do it with a dancer, but that's a little more complex. We're just managing simple formations right now. The principle of 2 couple dancing applies the same as the first instance, so that when you're done, you can either put them back where they were in the initial side, or bring that paired couple that was left behind in your original box over to the new side. Now, using that couple pairing movement is why the boxes are also called corner boxes. When I do a head square through and I've got these boxes, I'm in the west box. A west box is often referred to as a corner box. But I don't want to get focused on that, because what we're doing right now is just keeping the ability to move the dancers back and forth and keep them under control. Once you understand that principle of who to start with and who to move, you begin to understand the very early principles of sequence and relationship and square dance calling. Again, we're not going to focus on sequence and relationship because we really don't care. What we have to learn first is how to move the dancers back and forth and across under control. We don't care about sequence. We don't care about relationship. We don't care about resolution. That's not our focus. We have to step back and be able to move the dancers. Daryl Clendenin, in a conversation earlier, summed it up very, very quickly. He teaches resolution very quickly and shows them how to do a resolution technique. And then he says, okay, so I want you to get up there. He gives them a mic. You know how to resolve a square. You prove that. Get up and move the dancers. Get them somewhere so we can resolve them. And the new caller is going, okay, well, what do I call? Well, you may know how to resolve a square. You may know how to sight resolve a square using a technique. But if you can't move the dancers around and effectively move them back and forth across the grid, you can't call. And the way to do that is learning how to manage these simple formations of circles, boxes, and lines. So we'll go to the basic traffic pattern. The movement maintaining one paired couple in their original box and moving the unpaired couple back and forth, east and west, is commonly referred to as the basic traffic pattern. This basic traffic pattern is moving the unpaired couple back and forth, and it's been given the name the chicken plucker, which is a fundamental foundation module for all new callers. Why it's a foundation base for management is that this simple routine is the primary means for learning the principles of formation management, choreographic movement and transition from formation to formation, basic traffic flow incorporating the full square that's not in a circle movement, flow modules, their principles of application, and it's introducing a sophistication through the use of equivalents. For instance, star through instead of slide through. Square through 3 instead of right and left through, pass through, those kinds of things. So this allows you to manage formations through with early resolution principles. I'm putting my paired couple on the outside, and I'm moving the unpaired couple back and forth. The chicken plucker introduces all of this to you, but you'll learn it as you'll see it working. You learn it as a module, and you identify the flow from one box to the other box. The chicken plucker is, for those of you that aren't overly familiar, from a corner box setup, i.e. head square through, your best friend when you start to learn. Head square through, I've got an east-west box. Right and left through, that's an east-west box still. I'm only working on one side. Dive through, it's still an east-west box, but it's a brand new formation. It's now a double pass-through formation. Centers pass through. Oh, I've now switched somebody over onto the other side. I'm moving them in the traffic pattern. I still have east-west boxes, but I'm in a right-hand lady box. And then the full chicken plucker is just to repeat that sequence. And this is also where you learn the sophistication of the module with the introduction of equivalents. Instead of doing right and left through, I can call pass through, instead of right and left through, pass through, or instead of dive through, centers pass through, I can call pass through, trade by. You know, all those other kinds of things. I can call square through 3, trade by. And what that does, that replaces the right and left through, the dive through, centers pass through. All I'm doing is moving an unpaired couple back and forth across the grid using the traffic pattern. Once I'm done, if I've moved them over there, I can use that same module, pass the ocean, ladies trade, swing through, spin the top, recycle, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Do that 2 couple, and then repeat the other half of the chicken plucker. Square through 3, trade by. I'm back in my original setup, and I've used a sophisticated sequence with the center box. I've used a sophisticated sequence with the left-hand box or the west box. I've used the same sophisticated sequence with the right-hand box or the east box, and I've moved dancers back and forth so they're interacting with different people. Guess what? That's square dance calling. The boys' traffic pattern is shown on the screen. The girls' traffic pattern is generally the opposite direction. So they move concurrently, but concentrically, going a different direction around the grid. The chicken plucker is your friend. So if you don't know it, learn how to use it. The next step is managing the formations themselves. And this is the last part of formation. Formation awareness, sorry. Once you've got the ability to recognize those 9 common box standard arrangements, I wrote 10 again. I don't know why, but it's 9. The ability to recognize them is, of course, being able to use your understanding of movement mechanics from your call analysis sheet to transition from one of these known formations to the next. Now, this is often done by using movements such as star through. That changes the standard box setup to a facing line setup and back again. If I do star through from a box, I'm in lines. If I do star through from lines, I'm in a box. Again, I don't care about the sequence. I don't care about the relationship. All I want is standard boy on the left, girl on right. That's as much as the arrangement I want. And the formation, line, box, line, box. And there's a number of ways to do that. And eventually what you do is you move them back and forth again using 2 or 3 movements in what's known as a flow sequence that knowingly transfers the dancers from one known formation into another. An example of this is from an ocean wave, swing through, spin the top, step through. I've gone from an ocean wave to lines facing out. So I've developed this pattern saying, okay, if I'm starting in an ocean wave and I want to end up in lines facing out for, say, my focus is wheel and deal, I can call swing through, spin the top, step through, and establish that lines facing out. That means it requires a study of the mechanics of the movement. It requires practice. It requires more study and more practice. And none of this is done with a microphone in your hand and dancers in front of you. And once again, a good place to start is your basic call analysis sheet. You've got to identify a standard formation and think, what can I do from here? See what the movement does. Where do you end up? And then what can I do from there? And when you can answer the where am I and what can I do, you've answered the 2 questions that are most important to understanding the basics of formation awareness. It's that simple. I'm here. If I call this, where do I end up? And it's just a repetitive process. Once you have the basic formation awareness, you're going to be able to start delivering call combinations, and you'll find that your ability to call the next movement ahead of the dancers will increase significantly. The dancing is going to begin with, the dancing is going to begin to flow. It's going to become smoother, substantially smoother, and your formation recognition timing, in other words, your delivery timing, your command timing, your knowledge of the execution timing of how long the movement takes, watching it and understanding it is going to improve significantly. And your dancers will thank you for that. So, achieving this aim, what you've got to do is you've got to set exercise of yourself that pick a formation, from start to end, and then figure out how to get there. You may start with a static square and end in facing lines. So think about that for a second. If I want to end up, I could call head square through, slide through. That takes me to facing lines. Yep, good. I could call heads lead to the right, circle to a line. Great, that takes me to a line. If my setup is I'm in a static square and I want to end in a right-hand column, I could think, okay, what can I call? I can call heads lead to the right, circle to a line, touch a quarter. I'm now in a right-hand column. I pick a start point, I pick an end point, and then I know what each movement does to take me through that sequence to get me to where I want to go. So how do we do this? We work the formation, not the resolution. On this point, I don't care where the dancers are. I'm just moving formation to formation. Resolution, I may have a technique, but that'll come later. I'm worried about giving the dancers a smooth dance. So in order to do this, you've got to plan your exercise and you've got to exercise your plan. And it's a really, really good idea to set yourself out exercises that transition from one formation to another and then back again. Once you progress, you can add formations to transit through, like from a line to a trade by, to a completed double pass through, to a box. So you set yourself goals of a path, and you've got to figure out how to get from one to the next, to the next, to the next, to get to your end state. Okay. Remember, at this point, you're not looking for resolution, only ability to move the dancers smoothly around the floor. Make sure you incorporate your studies of the formation management, where it starts, where it finishes. Movements that activate dancers, but don't change formations. Okay. In other words, a right and left through is a good example. It gets the dancers moving, but it doesn't change the formation. Whereas star through activates dancers, but it changes the formation. Those things are equally important to develop and ensure that you introduce good flow activities into your formation management. By doing this, you gain the ability to move the dancers comfortably around and through the grid, and you move them effectively, and you maintain control of the formations in which the dancers find themselves, or in which you find the dancers, more likely. You're also going to develop the ability to see and use flow modules. These are movement combinations for both formation and aspect transition within the grid. This is going to make it a much easier transition, developing and building on skills such as sight calling and sight resolution. Without these fundamental formation management skills, it suddenly becomes too much, too hard, too fast. You've done a patter call, you've done a singing call, you've used your singing call lyrics as your patter call, you've got up there and the caller says, right, I want you to do this, this, and this, get him into a corner box, transit to a quarter tag, then I want a right-hand lady box out of sequence and resolve. And you're going, huh? But you can say, move the dancers from a static square to a box. Move that box so I have an ocean wave in the middle. What can I do? Move that ocean wave in the middle back to 2 boxes. You can do that without having to worry about who's where at any time, the sequence and the relationship, the arrangements of the dancers and what they're in, other than standard boy and the left, girl on the right. You can move the dancers. The rest of it comes later. Concentrate on the first part. That'll make the rest easier. For those of you that drive long distances with complex things, there's a little tool called a navigator. In square dance, there's a navigator as well. And that is recognizing the boxes, recognizing the formations, and planning your route. That's all a navigator does. Once you've got all these other stuff of moving around, it's time to really look at the west box and the east box in terms of the corner box and the right-hand lady box. Your knowledge of dancer movement and formation transition will now allow you to better see that all-important sequence and relationship for resolution. Remember the chicken plucker and moving the unpaired dancers back and forth? Well, because you now have the ability to manage the formations and move the dancers, you can begin to put your focus a little more on the movement of the unpaired couples by recognizing the formations and seeing where you want to put them. What it's doing, it's giving you control. Okay? You don't have to worry about the paired couples that you leave behind until you want to move them back onto the other side. You might want to move the paired couple across to the unpaired couple and create your corner box in the western or on the eastern location. You know, you can do all that. This gives you the ability to do that and gives you a whole different feel for the dance. So, for example, if I set my final destination as making a west or a corner box with a north-south orientation, and I want to start from a static square, I want to go through a double pass-through, I can call star through to get me into that double pass-through. Okay. I want a west box or a corner box, so I can call centers trade or left square through 3. That brings me back to the corner box. So all I'm doing is I'm just working those center 2 couples, head star through or head slide through, right and left through, pass through. I'm back in my west box. I've set that up from a static square. There's a number of ways to do that. Heads star through, California twirl. I've now set up that west box. I can now do an isolated 2 couple module because of the symmetry of the square. I know that whatever I do on this corner box or this west box is going to be happening in the east box. So I can do, there's my setup. I've done a star through. What did I call? I did a California twirl. I've set up a west corner box. I can do this. Oh, a 2 couple module. Let's use swing through, boys run, bend the line. Nope, sorry, let's not do that. Let's go swing through, spin the top, slide through. There's my little module. It's a 0 module. It takes me those two couples doing exactly the same thing on both sides, and it takes me right back to my west box, my corner box. I use the chicken plucker, half of it anyway, to take my unpaired couple and move them onto the other side. I could do centers California twirl and pass through. I could do square through 3 and trade by. I could do right and left through, pass through, trade by, right and left through, dive through, centers, pass through, any variation of that chicken plucker to move that unpaired couple onto the other side. Then I can repeat my module. Swing through, spin the top, slide through. I've done that. Great. Well, I need to bet back to my west box. Okay, well, let's just do that half of the chicken plucker again. Right and left through, pass through, trade by. I'm now back in my west box. Now, my ultimate goal was up here and in a west corner box with a north-south aspect. Oh, what am I going to do? So I want the dancers going north and south instead of east and west, but I still want that corner box. I have a few modules that I can do without changing the dancers. This is that rubber banding we're talking. So I'll call swing through, boys run, bend the line, pass through, and here's where I'm going to transit. Wheel and deal, centers pass through. I've now moved the dancers around. I'm now in a corner west box with the north-south orientation. So I can now call my Alaman left and all that. All I've done is use my knowledge of moving the dancers and change that orientation by changing where the dancers are, a quick transition. For most of you that know that, you can easily do star through, pass through, bend the line, star through. That's your inversion module. Does exactly the same thing. The more deliberate, sorry, no, that doesn't, because that inverts. Withdraw that last statement. The more you deliberately identify and practice these types of activities, the more that these traffic patterns and routines will become familiar to you. And after a while, you get to recognize where you are and determine not only the best route to get there, to get to where you want to be, but you'll also find a few alternative routes to take you through that. Okay? Now, if you think about it, it's not really much different than driving a car in a new city or a town. The first time you're in a new city, you're going to drive around and get familiar with your area, but you're going to take the routes that you know. I know where the highway is. I know where this route is. I know where my house is, and I know where my work. I'm going to use that same route back and forth. After a while, you've got routes to work, but you had to also go to the grocery store and you had to get 1 or 2 places memorized, and you start using those over and over again too. So you go to work, you come home. You go to the grocery store, you come home. But now you can go to work, come partway home, go to the grocery store, and come home. After a while, you become more familiar with the area and more familiar with driving, and pretty soon you start to pick out other routes that explore and take you from work to pick up the kids from school and to go get some pizza for dinner next to where you got to go pick up some milk and groceries, and then you go home. Well, guess what? You've just described calling. You recognize the movements, what they do, the formations, and how they affect the formations, then eventually start going through those formations with little stops along the way to do something else. This is just moving back and forth across a grid. And just like square dance calling, eventually you just drive the square along through the route of your choice, pick up everybody where they are, and make sure you get them all home safely. And you do that by working the formations, not the resolution. So, as a last piece of advice, KISS. Keep it short and simple. And there's very, very good reasons for that. And we'll talk about that when we get into a few other things in other sessions. Number 1, when you begin to use a variety of formations and intentionally move dancers from one formation to another one, try and keep the arrangements normal. In other words, boy on the left, girl on the right. However, periodically when you're calling, you may find some movements will take you into the abstract, non-standard arrangements. The idea, and when we talk non-standard arrangement, we're talking anything other than boy on the left, girl on the right. All the rest, boy, boy, girl, 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 boy, boy, girl, boy, all those, they're all considered non-standard at this point. Okay, boy on the left, girl on the right is standard. The idea is when this happens, and it will, normalize quickly. In other words, get a boy facing a girl and call star through. Whatever you do, call a boy, however you do it. This is not only better for you to maintain control, but also to allow the dancers to feel more comfortable. There'll be lots of time for calling all that non-standard stuff later, but right now there's just too much to learn and master before you start doing that. Okay. Number 2, you will become more aware of sequence and relationship as you proceed. It's automatic because you're watching the formations, you're watching the transitions, you're watching the grid, you're watching your unpaired couple move from one side to the other side, and then you might move them back, or you might take the paired couples and have them change sides. Okay. Don't make that your focus. That's going to start coming automatically. Practice working on identifying who is crossing the grid and bringing them back again. That way you control who's going where. This way you can work a west box or an east box much more efficiently. Remember, we're not working on resolution here, but just managing the formations and working the grid, moving through the grid. By maintaining the awareness of who's doing that movement, we become more aware of who to move and how to get that partner pairing back on the outside of the grid, making those east-west or north-south boxes, the corner box or the right-hand box. And third, or finally, recognize that the more time you spend on formation awareness and movement transition exercises, such as what we were talking about, the more capable you're going to become at moving dancers back and forth across the grid. Okay? You'll become more familiar and practiced at formation management, at flow sequences. You begin to become really aware of things like body flow, hand use, timing, and other details without even making that the focus, because you're worried about what can I do? Okay, where am I? What movement can I do from this? Where does this take me? What can I do next? Those little 3 things are on your call analysis sheet. And once you get used to it, you begin to move smoothly from the next to the next to the next. All your timing and recognition starts to improve. And when you finally do choose on a choreographic management technique, be it sight calling, module calling, mental image, whatever technique that you choose to master, those foundation skills are going to help you for whatever resolution or management path you choose. So remember, it is simple, not complicated. Take your time, don't rush through it. Your dancers are going to thank you for it. And as with our first slide, keep it simple and short. You don't want to be really, really complex with these long, long modules. Short, simple, in, out, move, get used to moving them. Get used to using your foundations, and it will come. If you try to learn all this crap in the middle, you try to learn that first, that's feeding with a fire hose. It's all good information, but if you still don't know how to do 1 + 1 = 2, it's not going to make any sense to you at all. Any questions? Anybody still there? Now, for anybody that was coming in looking for, here's how I manage formations and I can walk away and I can look at formations now and do everything. No, this is a step back, and it's really, really important because we've got some new callers here and we've got some very experienced callers. We tend to look at assumed knowledge of callers when we start to teach, and we don't go back to teach why what you're doing works. We leave that to the new caller to try and figure it out for themselves. And there's a lot of information to figure out. The idea is one step at a time. Now you can step back and say, this is why formation management actually works. This is what it's doing. I can now apply that and develop those other skills step by step. We as mentors have to allow that to happen, but we have to facilitate that happening. So let's open the floor up for discussion. It couldn't have been that good. It could have been that bad.
Good, Mel, because yeah, it's been good, Mel, because
Mel,
it's
he had to go.
What was that?
what Daryl's what Daryl's been doing with us, it's confirming basically what he's been saying.
Absolutely. And for
I can
those of
see
you
some
that are,
nodding heads.
yeah, for those of you that are looking at, Daryl Clendenin posts exercises in newbie callers on Facebook a lot, and he also runs groups. And a lot of these exercises are just that. If I'm in a line, how do I get to parallel ocean waves? What can I call? And what can I get? What will bring me back? He doesn't care about who's where. So if I'm in lines and I want parallel waves, pass the ocean. Oh, great. If I want to get back to a box, recycle. And it's finding pathways that will flow you from one movement and back again. And then he may change the exercise to say, okay, you're in parallel lines. I want you into a completed double pass-through position. What can I call from there to take me? And you learn to transit forward and back smoothly. Again, you're not working about resolution. This is going to come later. Daryl has some excellent exercises on newbie callers, and we were actually talking about that before the session. He unfortunately couldn't stay. But take the time to go, whether you're, you've been calling for 50 years, like Jeff down there in the corner. I think it's almost 50 years now, isn't it, Jeff? Little bit more?
I've been calling since 66. But my club turns 50 next Saturday.
Wow.
Milestone. That's you're coming up to 70 years, over 60 years of calling.
With the same
Damn.
caller the whole time.
And so you look at all this, whether or not you've got that realm of experience like Jeff, or you're a tradesman level caller like myself, or a new caller like Mark or Yolanda. All these exercises, going back and reviewing them, help put those basic formations back in your head, and the basis of management back in your head. And what you can do is apply those basic techniques to your current knowledge base. So how Yolanda would use them would be very different than Jeff uses, but the principles of what they're doing is exactly the same. The only difference is Jeff has a little bit more capacity and experience than Yolanda. When Yolanda's been calling for 60 years, she'll be doing probably better than Jeff and better than I am. That's just the reality of life. There's really not a lot to it. Let's stop making it so complicated. And that's why this session was called Stepping Back to Move Forward. We've got to stop trying to drink from a fire hose and just dip our cup into the pot. It's a lot easier to finish it that way. Or as I say, let's not try and swallow a whole watermelon. Let's cut it up into pieces and eat it one step at a time, enjoying it. And Masako has come up and said she wasn't able to be here. But as I said, Mark records all of these sessions and puts them up on the Orange County Caller website. For those of you that get the email invitation, the link is there. If not, just type in Orange County Callers or caller sessions in Zoom or in Google or whatever search engine you use, and you can find all these sessions recorded there. Anybody got any comments, questions, points, things they want to discuss? Hello, Hannah. Hello, Lars.
Hi, sorry, we're late.
That's all right. You made the effort to get here.
Yeah.
That's the big thing. Wow, this has got to be the most quiet group discussion after something. Either I explained that either so well, or I've fed everybody with a fire hose and they're going, I have no idea what he's talking about.
Well, for
It
those
comes
of
out
us
to
that have worked with
practice.
Daryl,
Yes.
Sorry, I missed that. I got Steve and then Ross. What was that, Steve?
I said, for those of us that have worked with Daryl, it was very clear and very well done.
Yes.
And like I said, I strongly encourage, if you're doing Daryl's exercises, take a moment to let him know that you're doing them, or ask questions, or just show that appreciation. Like a lot of people say, oh, thank you for doing all the Zoom sessions. I've gone back and I've recorded that. But a lot of times, Jeff will know this very well, and Mark will know this very well. You do a lot of work in the background. You put things out there that are helping And especially on Facebook or some of those blog sessions, nobody says it. Oh, it's a great exercise. I was doing this. I was doing this. I was doing this. But the person doing it gets no feedback whatsoever. And they don't, is this even worth doing? So if you're doing those kinds of things with Daryl, take a moment and say, hey, yeah, I really like that. Or this really opened my eyes to something. And if you discover something new to you, share it. You know, Yolanda, you could be talking to Jeff and say, hey, Jeff, did you know that from a corner box, if I did a square through 3 trade by, that does the same as right and left through pass through trade by. It's new to you, share it. Because Jeff will say, yeah, I knew that. That's a variation of the chicken plucker. You can do all sorts of things such as bang, 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 bang. And it's going to open your eyes. It's going to generate that conversation between experience and newbie and journeyman. And that's how we're going to learn and keep this activity alive.
This session made so much more sense than the first time that I was exposed to it, because I wasn't aware at that time that I needed to look at the other box because the ladies turn it the other way.
Mm-hmm.
So it's so much easier when you know that itty bitty little piece of information.
Well, we had this discussion about 4.5 years ago. I think it was just after your first caller school, and you were talking. Oh, I was in a session about formation management. It was so great, and it made so much sense. And I got up there, and I was able to do that. But when I got home, I couldn't remember anything. There's just so much to remember. And he said something about, okay, if I'm going to manage the formation, the sequence of the ladies is here, and I can identify it by this because the relationship of this is. And it was all one thing. And I think you were literally almost in tears back then because it was just, it made so much sense there at the time in caller school. But once I got home, and
No,
that's when I told you that your microphone, see, callers that run caller schools, they have a little circuit box. And if you look at their system, there's a little circuit box that turns off a special switch that's embedded into every caller's microphone. And that's the switch. It turns it off at a caller school, but on your own system, you've got that little switch that says, as soon as you pick up that mic, anything you learned in the past, you will forget.
No, it had to do with the fact that when you guys call it a right-hand lady box, it didn't make sense because I was following a lady to the left and you guys were following the men to the right. So it made sense to call it a right-hand lady box, but I needed to hear it the other way. Because I was in the left box, not the right one.
It was that kind of an explanation that a right-hand lady box means that, you are with, the right-hand lady is with her left-hand man. And just something as simple as that would have made that perspective for lady callers that manage differently so much easier. So who's your left-hand man? Not your partner. It's because you always exclude your partner. Because you've got a partner relationship, you've got a left-hand man, you've got, and so on and so forth. So in your case, you would work the right-hand man, and you'd be a right-hand man box or a left-hand lady box.
No, a right-hand lady box is to the left corner. That's how I see it.
Yep. And just having that clarification between the two that says this also, from a lady's perspective, means this. Now suddenly you've got it's essentially the Rosetta Stone, if you will.